Hello, friends, and welcome to the first Liberty Daily Vlogs. I'm your host, as always, Patrick McFarlane. And if you didn't catch the announcement video for the Liberty Daily Vlogs, as I've decided to call it now, I will include a link to that in the show notes page below. Liberty Daily Vlogs is going to be a segment where I just kind of get on and do an informal vlog, a daily vlog. And the purpose of this is to keep the content short. I don't want to bore everyone, but I'm going to jump right into the controversy here today and talk a little bit about libertarian infighting. And the question I want to posit is whether or not do you think that libertarian infighting is productive in the sense that we really need to nail down these concepts and fully tease out what the NAP is and how it applies to certain situations, but that being said, there's been a lot of vicious infighting in the libertarian movement lately, and my question to you is whether or not you believe it's productive. Because, believe it or not, left and right does exist, even in the libertarian sphere, I believe, and you can't escape it. And what we've seen recently has been this widening division, the drawing of lines, if you'd like to call it, between people on the left side of the liberty persuasion and people on the right side of the liberty persuasion. And I really think it kind of comes down to how you came to liberty, because those values that you carry with you persist even when you've discovered the truth of the NAP. And I think that it's inescapable. And you see people on the right, maybe, I know the Mises Institute has been associated with the right. I would say the Mises Institute is maybe culturally right, but most of them are guided by thin libertarianism, which is just a belief in the NAP and a trend towards individualism. And I guess if I could sum down in my understanding of what the major disagreements are over tactics. And I think they kind of depend upon how people came to liberty and what things are important to them. But that being said, within those things, you really get a lot of what I would call thick libertarianism, is people trying to attach different values onto the NAP, like a barnacle, if you will. And I think that there needs, if you're talking about things, there needs to be a clear distinction, especially when you get in these debates. You need to make the distinction of whether or not you are making an argument based on the NAP or whether or not you're trying to attach a barnacle. And I think more often than not, libertarians argue about semantics, maybe number one, but the next biggest thing would be whether or not to attach this barnacle to the non-aggression principle. And I've seen this kind of happen a lot on Twitter, especially, where, while the number one, like I said, is people arguing in circles over semantics, but the next, usually it flares up over the border debate, or this trend towards, I know the Mises Institute and what Jeff Deist was kind of talking about in his controversial speech over the summer was institutions outside of the state. And what are good institutions outside of the state? You know, do we want to prefer people being a part of a church over being part of a state? I think maybe some at the Mises Institute would say yes, you know, as long as it's a voluntary institution. But that being said, expressing a preference for the church over the state is something that I would not include in thin libertarianism as being part of the non-aggression principle. Or I mean, expressing a preference for the church over some other non-state voluntary organization. So basically you have this preference for maybe the family unit or Western civilization or the church or something like that. Well, maybe that's your preference, but that isn't included in the non-aggression principle. And, you know, that being said, I'm not against, you know, I've kind of got into this with Trey before about Western civilization and how I don't necessarily have a preference for Western civilization, although I know that objectively speaking, Western civilization has been the most friendly towards individualism and the principles of liberty. But I don't know if I would, you know, fight for Western civilization for the sake of Western civilization, because it's always a double-edged sword. You know, even when you get into that, because there's lots of bad things about Western civilization too, you know, pointing directly towards the warfare state. And you could get into semantics, you know, that's a deep rabbit hole to kind of get down when it comes to Western civilization. But yeah, so I've been thinking about this lately, whether or not it is preferable to have the infighting, because I know that infighting is a part of the libertarian movement. It has been since its conception, and it is necessary, I think, in some point, because we really need to have these conversations and nail down, exactly what it is that we believe in. But that being said, there is a tendency to get vicious, and I have to say that while I'm not a huge fan of people like Liberty Hangout or whatever, I think fighting viciously against Liberty Hangout is unproductive, I think, because I don't think no one's gonna convince anyone's mind. Maybe the audience will be convinced, but I don't think that, the guys over at Liberty Hangout are going to all of a sudden be like, you know what, we're sorry, we shouldn't have embraced, the alt-right, or if they've even done that, we're sorry, we shouldn't, we do have these Republican values. But I think maybe what they should do is try and differentiate between, okay, yes, come out, be like, yes, we're thick libertarians. We believe that people in the alt-right are libertarians. I just saw on Twitter today there was something where someone from Liberty Hangout said that the alt-right are true libertarians. I think it's Jared Howe said that. But they need to differentiate between whether or not they're pushing thin libertarianism or thick libertarianism, because I can understand them advocating for thick libertarianism, but then they can't call people who aren't their version of thick libertarian not libertarian. The libertarianism is about non-aggression, a trend towards individualism, and that's about it. There's not too much there. It's a pretty thin philosophy, as Walter Block would say. So I'm very interested in hearing what you guys think in the comments below. I've often described myself as being a centrist libertarian, or being the ultimate, I guess I would say, in thin libertarian, even though I was raised culturally right, and I would identify as being culturally right. So I think that those two things can coexist. You can have your own personal preferences outside of the non-aggression principle, but be sure to differentiate that when you're arguing, you are arguing based on thin libertarianism, because if you're arguing based on thick libertarianism, then who gives a fuck, because it's not part of what libertarianism is. So make that differentiation when you are arguing with people and doing some infighting, and be sure to tell me if you think I'm wrong in the comments below, like I said, and keep on the lookout for more hard-hitting Liberty Daily vlogs tackling some controversial content with my take. So thanks everyone, have a great day.